During a gray morning memorial at Riverside Garden, Damon Reed's phone vibrates in his coat pocket. A message flashes from his wife's old number. "I'm alive. Trust no one." The words stop him mid-prayer. No one else seems to notice. Instead of collapsing, Damon quietly slips the phone into his palm and walks away from the crowd, ready to find out who was lying and why his wife had to disappear. Damon Reed didn't cry at the memorial. At 42, the quiet owner of a neighborhood print shop, he stood still in the soft rain, watching strangers lay flowers in front of his wife's photo. A printed board with Layla's smiling face leaned against a folding easel. No body, no grave, just the river behind them and a name people whispered like it meant gone. His older brother, Warren Reed, 3 years ahead in age, an accountant who now managed the household bills, kept ushering guests away from the gathering at Riverside Memorial Garden. He'd volunteered through the church, but the way he handled this felt practiced, like he'd done it before. "She's missing," Reverend Don Calloway reminded a mourner gently, stepping in behind Damon. "There's no death certificate, just a court record that says missing." People meant well, but they spoke to Damon as if he'd buried his wife. He didn't correct them. Instead, he slipped his hand into his coat pocket and checked his phone again. The message glowed against the gray. "I'm alive. Trust no one." The number came from Layla's old project line, an eSIM, or electronic SIM card. It was a second, digital phone line Layla used when working on nonprofit grant programs, especially the complicated community audits. Damon still had the purchase receipt. Back then, they'd labeled it in their shared folder as Layla Grant SIM. That line should have been deactivated when the grant project closed. He stood motionless for 1 beat longer, then turned away from the photo and walked past Warren without speaking. "Go home, brother," Warren said as Damon passed. "You need rest." Damon didn't answer. In the car, he pulled the message again, copied it, screenshotted the metadata, and saved it to a new folder. The windshield blurred with rain, drops sliding like slow-moving static. "If it's you," he muttered, starting the engine, "prove it the way we'd file a record." Instead of home, he turned toward the shop. Inside, the place was quiet, just the faint smell of toner and paper. He kept it clean even when no one came in, always dusting the rollers, wiping down the counters, maybe because grief needed somewhere to live, and his lived in his hands. He ducked under the front desk. Something caught his eye, a tiny USB drive taped beneath the counter with electrical tape. He snapped a photo with the timestamp on his phone. It could have been planted. He opened the drawer, pulled out a printed evidence reception form, a blank template Nina had once given him. Nina Cole was Layla's closest friend and a paralegal at a small legal firm. She had a habit of planning for the worst, and right now, that felt like a gift. He logged the date and time, peeled the tape, and lifted the USB. "Let's keep this clean." He slid the drive into the shop computer. The security camera above the register kept recording. One file appeared. Second run, 4.975. Second run was the tag they used for a reprint, usually when a client wanted an identical invoice or flyer printed again. This one had a number, 4.975, too round to ignore. He copied the file into a fresh folder, zipped it, generated a SHA-256 hash, a string of numbers and letters that acted like a digital fingerprint, and wrote the code into his log. Only then did he print the invoice. The press hummed low, feeding the page out warm. "Who reprinted a fundraiser invoice after 3 months?" he said to no one. Back home, the kitchen was quiet. Layla's laptop sat on the table, closed. He'd bought it, managed the household devices. Their admin accounts were shared. But the screen asked for her password. He typed the number of their favorite hymn. Click. fan word to life. "Still keeping our rhythm, huh?" he said. He noted the login time in his log, then opened a few folders, but didn't touch the encrypted ones yet. His phone buzzed. Warren. "Hey," Damon said, keeping his voice steady. "Quick question. On the fundraiser ledger, who submitted the invoice from Harlan Supply LLC?" "Man, I've been meaning to check that. I'll pull the files later," Warren replied, voice soft. "Drive safe, okay?" There was a pause before the last part. Too careful. "You're scared of something," Damon said, and ended the call. The fridge hummed in the background. He let the silence stretch. Then he grabbed a pen. Later that night, he stopped by the church. The doors were locked. He slipped a folded note under Reverend Calloway's office door. "Need counsel when you have time." On the bulletin board, a flyer fluttered from a pushpin. Grant renewal meeting, next week. Same program title Layla had worked under. Same phrase the invoice had printed at the bottom. Same word, different meaning, Damon said under his breath. Back at the kitchen table, he slid the printed invoice and USB into a manila envelope, signed across the seal, wrote the time. Then finally, he texted Nina. "Need your help, no one else." The coffee machine gurgled once, slow and low, like it was waiting for the next page. On the counter sat the envelope and his phone, both marked with today's date. Morning light pushed through blinds in Nina Cole's apartment, laying stripes across the kitchen table buried in case binders. She'd cleared a space for one envelope. Damon slid it forward. Same envelope from the night before, sealed, signed, time-stamped. Next to it, his phone with a matching entry. Nina, 37, wore reading glasses and a gray hoodie, her voice flat from habit. As a paralegal, she'd seen too many chain of custody mistakes gut good evidence. "We follow process," she said. "Every hand that touches it, recorded." She flipped open a new evidence log, the same kind police used. Date, time, name, item ID. Damon picked up the pen. His name went first, next to the line marked Discoverer. The printer hummed as she printed a copy. The page slid out smooth. "No signatures, no proof," she added. They opened the USB backup first, not the original drive, but the zipped folder Damon had created the night before. One file loaded on screen, second run, 4.975. Vendor name, Harlan Supply LLC. Nina typed it into the state's online business registry. Nothing looked normal, no website. The mailing address belonged to a private mailbox store, the kind with rows of identical P.O. boxes behind a strip mall door. She frowned, zoomed in, then pulled up filings from two other fundraiser vendors Damon had quietly flagged before. The exact same mailbox unit. "Same box," she said, circling the number with a blue pen. "Same handwriting on the forms. That's not coincidence." Damon crossed his arms. "So these aren't real vendors. They're shells, empty names used to process money." Nina clicked into the state's UCC filings, Uniform Commercial Code records. These are public documents that show who's putting down collateral, what they owe, and to whom. It's the paperwork version of trust, but verify. One caught her eye. The listed email didn't just look familiar. It used the domain of a company Damon had seen in Warren's client records, norwelladvisory.com. She printed the filing, laid it beside the Harlan record. "So, the vendor loop," Damon said slowly, "runs through his client web." Nina nodded. They worked in silence for a minute. Then she uncapped a second pen and started outlining. "Here's what makes a pattern," she said. 3 signs, invoices in perfect round numbers, like $4,000 or $5,000. Payments made 5 to 7 days apart. And this tag, second run, same metadata copied across records. "That's Layla's term," Damon said. "She used it for reprints, same file, new time." Nina nodded again, but kept her eyes on the screen. Intent still needs proving, but the pattern's there. They agreed not to rely on screenshots. Only verified copies would hold up in court. Damon brought Layla's laptop from his bag, admin access still valid. He mounted the hard drive and made a read-only duplicate. No edits, no touching originals. Nina opened a folder titled Community Audit. Inside were encrypted spreadsheets and a handwritten note. If I'm gone, give to Carver. Damon read it twice. Lionel Carver was a veteran detective, 50 years old, soft-spoken but firm. He'd spoken at the memorial, careful with every word. Outside, thunder rolled. Nina sealed the note in a clear pouch, logged the time and signatures, then looked at Damon. We contact him, today. They drove to the precinct together. Carver met them in a windowless interview room, reading as they talked. His tone didn't change. He didn't say the word illegal. He didn't say fraud. He said, "This isn't enough." Damon tensed. "I believe you," Carver added, "but I can't open a case on partial data." He pulled out a blank police evidence receipt form and pushed it across the table. "Hash the files," he said. "Seal the drive, originals untouched. When you're ready, we file officially." The stapler clicked as he joined the form to a cover sheet. "Bring it back sealed," he repeated. "Not guessed." Back at the shop, Damon and Nina worked methodically. Data compressed, SHA-256 hash generated. The code, a long string of letters and numbers, wrote down twice, printed once. They loaded it onto a new USB drive, sealed it in an envelope, signed across the flap. The marker squeaked. The tape ripped clean. Damon's hand trembled as he initialed the time. Truth felt heavier when it wore his brother's name. "Truth first," Nina said gently. "Family later." They logged the envelope number. Then Damon made one more stop before dark, St. Bridget's. The church lights were on for choir rehearsal. Reverend Dawn Calloway sat in her office, folding bulletins. He sat down across from her, quiet for a moment. "If I go through with this," he said, "my brother gets caught in it." She didn't rush to answer, just let the space breathe. "Truth and love share the same house," she said. "If you let them." Damon nodded slowly. "Then I'll keep both doors open." That night, he placed the sealed drive in his home safe, locked it, noted the hash code in his logbook, and wrote on the envelope, "To Detective Carver, original evidence set." The safe clicked shut. Damon leaned back, exhaled long. "This time," he said aloud, "we do it by the book." The next morning, the shop lights flickered on. The sealed drive waited by the register, untouched. Outside, the sound of church bells carried faintly on the air. The ledgers were calling. The hum of the print shop came early that morning. Damon Reed flipped the light switch, stepped behind the counter, and unlocked the small safe. Inside, the sealed envelope waited, still untouched, still signed. He logged the check in his notebook. Transferred to Detective Carver, 08:06 a.m. One task done. Next came Layla's work files. He retrieved her laptop again, opened the drive, and typed his new note. "Device belongs to household. Admin, Damon Reed. First access today, 09:14 a.m. Everything stayed by the book." He copied the encrypted files into a secure folder, then created a read-only duplicate. Nothing altered, nothing touched beyond what was allowed. When it finished, he closed the lid and relocked the original. The printer hummed as he ran off a checksum copy to pair with the USB. Nina called as he finished. "Don't open the source again," she reminded him. "Work only on the copy." Damon nodded, though she couldn't see. Understood. He stared at the new folder a second longer, then took a chance. Typed Youth Voices Pilot, a grant Layla once worked on, as the password. The folder opened. Inside were spreadsheets, dozens, each one listing payments made every 5 to 7 days. Perfect round numbers, $5,000, $4,200, $6,000, never a penny off. He exported a new read-only set and marked the time. Then he called Nina. Patterns too clean to be random. That afternoon, Damon walked into St. Bridget's Church with a copy of Layla's power of attorney paperwork and a signed letter from Reverend Calloway. The Reverend met him in the office first, reviewed the situation, and signed off. Damon was permitted to receive copy records related to the grant fund under Layla's name. The church treasurer, an older woman with careful eyes, hesitated at first. "These files stay in the room," she said. Damon understood. "I'm not asking for originals, just to confirm numbers." She handed over a red folder and watched him like a librarian. Each transaction was listed with a date, a vendor name, and an amount, rounded clean, always to the nearest hundred. But two entries jumped out, blank invoice numbers. Everything else followed a rhythm. These two didn't even have timestamps. Damon photographed them both, each with his phone's timestamp visible, and signed the log on the back of the access sheet. "Same rhythm," he muttered. "Two missing beats." Nina ran a deeper search later using the State Business Registry, a public online database for all registered companies in the state. She cross-referenced addresses, registered agents, email domains. "The vendors," she said over the phone, "all share the same P.O. box. But more than that, look." She highlighted the registered email, apenorwelladvisory.com. "That's the same domain your brother's client uses." She printed the filing, circled the registered agent's name, a cousin of one of Warren's longtime clients. "That email ties your brother's client straight to these shells." Damon didn't say much, just sat still for a long second. The next day, he visited Warren's office under the pretense of dropping off tax forms. They made small talk, short and light. Then Damon noticed it. A folder sitting near the edge of Warren's desk. Community Vendors FY22. He didn't touch it, didn't lean in. But he memorized the code stamped on the tab. Warren tapped a pen against his mug and gave him a narrow look. "You still chasing ghosts?" Damon kept his voice level. "Just matching numbers." Outside, he slid into his car and texted the folder code to Nina. Temptation itched under his skin. He could have opened that folder with one motion. Nina's reply came fast. "Public copies only. Chain of custody over speed." Damon placed the phone face down on the seat and started the ignition. Understood. Later, at the church, Reverend Calloway poured tea into mismatched mugs while Damon reviewed his notes aloud. Every entry, every code, every duplicate vendor. When Damon paused, the Reverend spoke. "You wonder if this ruins trust with your brother." Damon gave a slow nod. "Justice and mercy," the Reverend said, "are neighbors, not enemies." "I'll knock on both doors," Damon answered. That evening, Nina compiled everything into a preliminary report. Invoices, registry matches, digital hashes, time-stamped images, vendor links. But one thing still strained the file open. No first-hand confirmation from Layla. Damon knew where she'd last worked. An old cabin listed in her project files. It hadn't been touched in months. But if anything remained there, it could change the weight of their evidence from heavy to final. He zipped the evidence bag shut, checked the hash, and packed it for the drive. "Cabin first," Nina said over the phone, "then Carver at 10 a.m. The night deepened. Outside, the trees shifted in the wind. Inside, Damon's car faced the river road, headlights off for now. On the passenger seat, the files sat ready. Damon Reed pulled off the shoulder of the narrow river road, tires crunching through gravel as the old cabin came into view. It hadn't changed much since the last project Layla had worked, back when the Youth Voices grant still had funding and optimism. Late afternoon light slanted through the trees. The cabin sat low and quiet, more utility shed than house. Damon parked, checked the lock on his glove box, then stepped out with the evidence bag tucked under his arm. He didn't have keys, no deed, no right to enter. He called Detective Carver. "This property's still held by the NGO," Carver said after a short pause. "It's organizational. Stay outside. We're on the way." Damon looked up at the roofline, then at the warped porch boards. "Copy that. I'll wait on the porch." Wind stirred the branches. A power line dipped overhead, still carrying current. That shouldn't have been possible. He climbed the steps quietly, eyes scanning the windows. One of them showed movement, a glow from a power strip, half a dozen cans stacked by a chair. Signs of life, or at least someone trying to hold it together. He stepped closer to the glass, heart steady but sharp now. "Layla," he called, voice low. A pause. Then the soft creak of a floorboard. Inside, a voice said, "Damon, don't step in yet." He froze. The door opened slowly. Layla stood there, thinner than he remembered, her frame wrapped in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, hair pinned back, eyes alert but not afraid. Neither moved. The air held them in place. Finally, she stepped aside but didn't wave him in. Damon stayed 1 pace back, just as she'd asked. "I had to vanish to finish gathering proof," she said. "No one else would have been safe if I stayed." The river murmured behind them. A steady wind moved across the porch. Damon didn't argue. His breath eased out once, then again. Layla stepped back and returned with a folder. Paper files, thick with ink and staple marks. Stamped vendor records, printed ledgers, physical proof. "These are the originals," she said. He didn't reach for them. "Keeping these off-site, it could look like obstruction." "I thought hiding them kept you safe," she said. "I was wrong," he nodded. "At least now they'll count." He reached for his phone and held it where she could see. "I'm recording this conversation. Do you agree?" "I agree." He tapped the red button. The tone beeped. Layla said clearly, "Warren's firm processed those vendor payments without review. The shells didn't submit real work. Just cut and paste invoices." Damon's fingers didn't shake, but he felt the weight settle into his wrist. Minutes later, a pair of black SUVs crunched over the gravel. Carver stepped out first, followed by Nina. Layla's back straightened at the sight. Damon turned slightly toward her. Carver stopped at the porch. "You're not under arrest," he said. "But if you've got original evidence, we need to log it. Fully." Layla hesitated. "If I hand these over, am I a suspect?" "You can register as a cooperating witness," Carver said. "Means you help today, you testify later. That's cooperation, not crime." Police radios crackled behind him. No cuffs, no rush. Nina stepped forward and opened a new evidence log and police receipt form. Standard documents, proving who handed what to whom and when. "Delivering original papers and digital copies," Nina read aloud. "Hash code A7D1, recorded," Layla signed. Damon saw her hand tighten around the pen just for a second. "Here's everything," she said. "No duplicates left hidden." Carver flipped through the folder, counted pages, matched hash values, sealed the packet in a plastic evidence bag and labeled it Fraud Case 21045. Near the bottom, on a margin note, Warren's name appeared. Damon saw it but didn't speak. "Receipt complete," Carver said, sealing the bag. "Chain of custody intact." Layla filled out one last page, brief but exact. She confirmed the data came from her authorized work files. No private systems accessed, no external tampering. Carver signed off and wrote her designation on the top. Protected witness, Grant Fraud Case, 21045. "You're under protection now," he said. "Not suspicion." Damon stepped outside while officers cataloged the rest. Layla followed. They stood at the edge of the porch, the river just visible through the trees. No talking for a moment. Then Damon said, "I'm tired of secrets, not of you." Layla nodded. "Then let's finish this together." Behind them, the evidence bag was loaded into the trunk of Carver's vehicle. A final folder exchanged hands. Carver returned and handed Damon a copy. Witness delivery confirmation, one signature line. Damon signed, then added the time. The trunk latch clicked closed. "From now on," Carver said, "let the records talk." The convoy started down the gravel path, lights off, engines low. Damon and Layla stood in the quiet for a second longer, then turned back to the door. Together, they locked the cabin. No ceremony, just a key click. Then a turn toward the car. Gravel shifted underfoot. "I'm sorry it took this long," Layla said. Damon answered, "We'll do the rest right." At the police records division, fluorescent light made everything feel colder than it was. Detective Lionel Carver stood at the intake counter, setting down a thick envelope labeled Fraud Case 21045. Behind the plexiglass, the records clerk flipped open the logbook, hands already ink-smudged from earlier forms. "Every handoff," the clerk said. "Signatures for each." Carver didn't argue. He wrote 2 names on every line, Damon Reed and Layla Reed. He knew the policy. Chain of custody wasn't a formality. It was the backbone. The clerk stamped each page. "Chain verified," she said, the rubber thump echoing in the glass box. "From field to file." Carver nodded once and left, case folder tucked back under his arm. At the district attorney's office across town, Carver sat across from the lead prosecutor with his notes in order. He walked them through the timeline, Layla's disappearance, the invoice trail, the cabin recovery, each step backed with log entries, hashes, witness forms. "It's all here," he said, "but if you want charges to stick, we need financial confirmation that goes beyond the internal links." The DA leaned back. "No case without outside proof." Carver picked up the phone. He called the Financial Crimes Task Unit and requested a joint file review. Then he dialed IRSCI, the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigation Branch, which handles federal tax-related fraud. He didn't smile when he hung up. "State and federal eyes," he said, "on the same trail now." Meanwhile, back at the print shop, Nina Cole sat with Damon and Layla at the back table, flipping through the cooperation paperwork for Layla's protected witness status. Layla kept fidgeting with the edge of a file folder. "I hid too long," she said. "I let it all grow." Nina didn't flinch. "You acted before anyone else got hurt. That's what matters." The printer ran steady behind them. Layla pressed her thumb to the corner of the paperwork. "Then let's finish it right." That afternoon, 2 forensic techs arrived with insulated gear cases. Damon handed over the drive from the safe. The techs didn't speak much, just moved with precision. They attached a write blocker, a device that prevented any changes to the original files, then created a forensic image. It took nearly an hour, every byte double-checked. "Hash confirmed," one said. "Originals untouched." The report began to take shape. Preliminary tracing showed grant money leaving the nonprofit account, passing through a local bank, then landing in accounts tied to one of Warren's firm's longtime clients. Carver brought that file to Damon directly. "No confrontation," he said, sliding it across the table. "Let the search warrant speak." Damon didn't answer. He didn't need to. At home that night, Layla labeled each remaining receipt and folder for the audit chain. Dates, grant numbers, vendors. Her hands paused once, hovering over a folder marked April Transfer B. "I used to think silence made me strong," she said quietly. Damon closed the drawer beside her. "Truth works better in pairs." They didn't say more. The next day, Reverend Calloway visited the house with a folded church notice. On the way in, he mentioned that someone had started whispering that Layla staged her disappearance for sympathy. She didn't flinch. She just opened the notice and pinned it to the fridge. "Answer rumor with record," the Reverend said, "not emotion." "I'll stand where I left," Layla replied, "at the truth." By midweek, the DA issued a subpoena ducis tecum, a court order requiring both the bank and Warren's accounting firm to produce financial records. Alongside it came a preservation order, freezing the deletion of logs or client communications. There was some delay, defense counsel pushing back. Didn't matter. The task agent served the orders the same day, fax tone, stamp click. "They can't erase what's frozen," Carver said. That night, Damon's phone rang just past midnight. Warren's name lit the screen. His voice was raw. "I didn't mean for it to grow this big," he said. Can you tell me what to do?" Damon kept his tone even. "Get counsel. Tell the truth." Low static filled the line. Warren didn't reply before the call dropped. By morning, the district attorney confirmed they had enough for probable cause. Fraud, falsification, layered shell vendors. Layla sat across from Damon at the kitchen table, the weight of their last name pressing between them. "If this goes public," she said, "Reed doesn't just mean us. It means family, legacy." "Silence broke it," Damon said. "Honesty fixes it." A clock ticked on the wall. Layla nodded. The Financial Crimes Task Unit began drafting restitution estimates. Some of the shell vendors claimed they didn't know, just signed what was sent to them. Layla offered to walk them through how grant workflows were supposed to operate. She'd built enough of them. A young investigator scrolled through her notes. "Your audit fills the blanks," he said. Back at the precinct, Carver walked into the file room and paused by Damon, who was reviewing log sheets for the 4th time. "Thanks for the patience," Carver said. "I'm just tired," Damon replied. Carver nodded once. "Integrity sounds quiet, not loud." Then he shut the file drawer with a solid final click. "Tomorrow," he said, tapping the red folder in his hand. "Search warrant 21045. Dawn hadn't yet broken when the police cars rolled up to the curb in front of Warren Reed's office. Their engines idled low, a silent warning to anyone already at their desk. Inside the glass building, someone peeked between the blinds. Across the street, Damon Reed stood motionless beside a closed storefront. One hand in his coat pocket, the other holding nothing but still clenched. He hadn't come to stop anything. He came to see it through. Detective Lionel Carver stepped out of the lead cruiser and walked straight to the door. He didn't knock. "Search warrant 21045, he called as the door swung open. "Open seizure log," boots on tile. A clipboard passed to the first officer through the door. The room inside stilled. Damon didn't move. From the lobby, Warren was led out, flanked but not cuffed. Hands visible, shoulders hunched, shirt collar open like he dressed in a rush. He looked up and spotted his brother through the glass. "Tell Mom I didn't plan this," he said. Damon said nothing. Only the flagpole chains clinking in the breeze answered. Inside, the forensics team rolled out their gear. On-site imaging began. Drives copied byte for byte without being removed from the machines. A junior associate tried to object. Client confidentiality, repeated like a shield. Carver didn't blink. "Attorney-client communications are excluded," he said, pointing to the scope section. "Accounting ledgers are not. Log every hash before bagging." The machines buzzed to life. Screens glowed. Keyboards clicked in patterns that sounded surgical. At the district attorney's office, the new files joined the existing pile. Bank records, payment trails, company filings. Everything clicked into place. No more theory. The paper spoke. Defense asked to open plea negotiations. "Offer only if he maps every transfer," the DA said. flipping to the final page of the ledger. "He'll take it," said the assistant DA. That night, back at the precinct, Damon and Layla sat side by side in the recording room. The microphone between them looked small, but it heard everything. Layla's voice shook slightly when she began. Her hands rested on a folded tissue, not for tears, just to anchor herself. Damon tapped the recorder. "I'm recording this. You agree?" Layla nodded. "I agree." A small beep confirmed it. "His firm moved the grants," she said, steadying. "The vendors were shells. The reprints were used to hide the cycles. I saw it through the invoice metadata. Same files, slightly changed dates." No one interrupted her. No one needed to. Outside the station, reporters waited. Reverend Dawn Calloway was already there, prayer book tucked under one arm. When cameras began flashing, she stepped forward and placed herself between them and the Reeds, wordless and calm. The door shut behind them. "Faith," she said quietly, "stays quiet when truth speaks." The next morning, Warren sat in a room with the DA and task agents. He gave a full statement. "I diverted funds to cover firm debt," he admitted. "Then I kept going. I thought I could repay it quietly." He signed an allocution, a formal, sworn confession, line by line, paper flipped, pen scratched. At the bank, compliance officers began processing the court-ordered freezes. They pulled up SARs, suspicious activity reports filed over the last year. Every flag transfer was routed, tallied, cross-checked. The funds, fragmented across accounts, were gathered and placed in escrow, a neutral holding area, frozen by court order until distribution could be settled. "Funds secured pending allocation," the lead officer confirmed. That night, news headlines lit up local feeds. "Accountant cooperates in grant fraud probe." The comments split down the middle. Some praised the system. Others asked where the money had gone. Sunday arrived on schedule. Layla walked into St. Bridget's Church before the choir finished warming up. Damon walked in behind her, silent but steady. Some looked away. A few whispered. None stood. Reverend Calloway caught her eye and stepped forward. He didn't make it dramatic. He didn't turn it into a sermon. "Welcome back, Mrs. Reed." At sentencing, Warren stood in front of the judge and pled guilty to multiple counts, falsifying records, fraud, and obstruction of nonprofit grant disbursement. He accepted the full restitution schedule. No objections. No deals left. Damon visited him once before transfer. The visiting room was beige and small, the kind of space designed to feel temporary. "I started with good intent," Warren said. "End with truth," Damon replied. Weeks passed. Damon and Layla worked with Nina to finalize the public audit report, a simplified document explaining the case to the community in terms they could trust. Totals appeared stark on paper. Losses, recovered amounts, frozen transfers still pending. Layla pressed her finger to the first column. "Put the recovered funds first," she said. "People need to see what made it back." The final press update was quiet, nearly procedural. Carver stood at a podium with the task unit, the DA beside him. No media frenzy, just rows of chairs and a single overhead mic. He thanked the witnesses. A reporter raised a hand. "Is this the end of the case?" Carver glanced at Damon, then answered without pause. "This phase ends," he said. "The wider inquiry continues." Cameras flashed once, twice. Damon stood in the back row, arms folded, eyes tired. When the room cleared, he exhaled once and murmured, "Doing right still matters when you're tired." 2 weeks after sentencing, Detective Lionel Carver arrived at the district attorney's office with a slim blue folder under his arm. The sunlight through the blinds dusted the papers inside. The DA leaned forward across the table. Carver placed escrow account statements on the desk, and next to them the printed confirmation from IRSCI, Internal Revenue Service criminal investigation. The DA slid the documents into a folder and tapped a stapler. Click. It's all traceable now. We can release funds, the DA said. Carver let a slow breath out. The money was no longer hope. It was movement. Later that afternoon, Layla Reed broke the seal on an envelope from the state program that designated her as a protected witness. The words pressed on her chest. Confidentiality, unless she chose otherwise. She handed the letter to Damon. He read the clause aloud. Identity remains confidential unless you choose otherwise. Her voice was quiet. Then I'll stay quiet until the report speaks. Her fingers lingered on the paper, the crease soft. A few days later, the Nonprofit Oversight Board, an agency that regulates charitable grant programs, reached out to Layla. They asked for her help in rebuilding their compliance policy. Layla sat at the dining table, the audit logs and folders spread around her. Doubt hovered at her back. She had vanished for months. Could she show up now as credibility? Damon placed a hand on her shoulder. They asked because you saw where it cracked. Layla nodded. Pen scratched across the acceptance form. All right, I'll help fix it. At St. Bridget's Church, Reverend Dawn Calloway pinned a new note on the corkboard just beside the entryway. The header read, "Recovered funds to support Youth Voices program." Some parishioners still whispered in the pews about what had happened, but the Reverend included only Damon and Layla's initials at the bottom of the note, respecting privacy while affirming the outcome. "Grace doesn't need a headline," he said softly to Damon when he noticed. Damon nodded, looking at the board. Sometimes patience had to outlast applause. Meanwhile, Nina Cole met with Carver and the DA to review a request under the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, federal law allowing public access to formal records. Reporters wanted unredacted documents, including witness names and personal details. The DA flipped through the request, then closed the file. Denied for the protected witness sections. Printer beeped. Folder slapped shut. Nina looked at the DA, then at Carver. "Transparency stops where safety starts." Carver gave a brief nod and left the room. At home, Layla sat at the desk late into the night. The rain tapped the window. She opened a blank document titled Witness Impact Statement. She paused. Every sentence nudged memory, guilt, regret. Then she typed, dates, actions, results, no emotion added. "I'll let the facts say sorry," she whispered, as the keyboard clicked in rhythm with the rain. On the day of the restitution hearing, Carver and Damon arrived early and sat quietly in the back row. Defense counsel asked the judge to consider a reduced penalty, citing Warren's cooperation. The judge paused, then struck the gavel. Thud. "Cooperation noted. Restitution mandatory," the judge said. Damon exhaled a slow sigh. The law had spoken. The court authorized transfer of funds from escrow to verified community accounts. Banking clearance would take days. Carver stayed past lunch, watching every digital signature, stamp click, ledger update. "Funds cleared pending local disbursement," a clerk said softly. Carver gave a thin smile, just a nod, no headline moment. Outside the courtroom afterward, Reverend Calloway found Damon leaning against the columns. He placed a hand on Damon's shoulder. "Repair is still creation," he said. Damon looked across the steps, traffic humming below. "It feels smaller than justice," Damon admitted. The Reverend squeezed his arm. "That's because you're building it." That evening, back at the print shop, the Youth Voices program restarted its flyers. Damon loaded the tray himself. One volunteer was late, so he ran the press till midnight. Pages stacked up neat and clean under the lamp. The press hummed, rollers spinning. "Paper's clean again," Damon murmured. He nodded at the stack and shut down the machine. It awaited the next story. Morning sunlight slanted through the front windows of Damon Reed's print shop, warming the wide wooden counter where flyers, forms, and invoices often rested mid-process. He set a mug down, the steam rising slow. He brewed coffee and idly checked the day's new orders. Half of them came from local nonprofits, with lines like, "Thank you for your integrity during the case." He paused over one. He didn't glance at the sender name. He filed it quietly into a folder marked Client Orders, without reply. Coffee poured into the mug filled the room with its slow hiss. "Work, then talk," he muttered to himself. Later that morning, Layla Reed walked into the State Nonprofit Oversight Board's conference room. She carried a stack of binders, her new audit checklist for grant programs. Her voice shook slightly as she introduced herself and the document she had helped craft. The projector hum filled the space while she gave her opening remarks. The director nodded after a long moment. "Your checklist becomes our standard," he said. Layla exhaled. She steadied herself. "Then let's keep it simple and real," she replied. Across town, Detective Lionel Carver shut his laptop and closed his case summary folder. He forwarded the final file to the Office of Inspector General, OIG, the Federal Oversight Unit for Fraud Investigations. The waiting period would take weeks for final review. He typed in the note, "All material verified, no evidence gaps." The upload chime sounded. "Phase concluded, oversight pending," he said, quietly to the empty office. That afternoon, the service at St. Bridget's Church had a small turnout, a quiet crowd despite the significance of the moment. Reverend Don Calloway stood at the front of the sanctuary, titled the service Restitution and Renewal. He began by reading aloud the first lines of the community grant report that Layla and Damon had helped finalize. Wooden pews creaked under shifting weight. Organ tones were faint in the background. "What was lost, we accounted for. What was found, we will use well," Reverend Calloway said. Many heads nodded slowly. In the minimum security facility where Warren Reed was now held, he wrote a letter to Damon. Damon hesitated with the envelope in his hands. Sitting at his kitchen table, littered with logs and printed files that still smelled of toner. Layla moved to his side silently and handed the letter to him without comment. He tore it open. The voice in the letter, Warren's voice, read, "I'll serve my time. Tell her thank you for not lying to protect me." Damon's pen hovered above his reply. Words came hard. He wrote one page, no reproach. "Make your next balance sheet honest." He signed it, sealed the envelope, and slipped it into the outgoing mail. The pen scratch was louder than he expected. A few days later, Layla recorded a short training video for new grant officers across the region. She sat in front of a simple backdrop, folder of notes next to the camera. Halfway through, she stumbled, memory flashing back to the second run file from the print shop, the invoice reprint that started it all. She paused, took a breath, then pressed on. The camera clicked as she nodded. "If you see the same number twice, ask why," she said firmly. Back in the print shop, Damon loaded the first edition of that training manual onto the press. He stuck a small line at the bottom. Author, Layla Reed. The ink ran low halfway through the run. He swapped in a fresh cartridge and pressed resume. The machine whirred. He backed away and watched the sheets stack neat under the output tray. "Still worth the ink," he murmured. That evening, the television screen in the shop's break room flickered a local news segment. Recovered Grants Fund New Youth Projects. Reporters requested interviews with Damon and Layla. Damon declined. He closed the laptop lid. "Let results speak," he told Layla softly. She didn't answer, just looked at him with a small, calm smile. At home later, they filed away the last case document. The binder marked closed lay on the shelf. Damon turned off the light in the room. His voice was low. We'll live ordinary now. Layla stood at the doorway. The soft click of the switch echoed. Ordinary sounds right, she said. A week later, the OIG issued its final confirmation. Case 21045 verified. Restitution complete. Damon read it twice, pausing over the official language in quiet disbelief. He slid the paper into the binder and snapped it shut. Binder snap echoed in the quiet. Done means done, he said. Sunday morning, at the garden by the church where the memorial had once stood for Layla, new benches had been built from reclaimed wood. Rain clouds gathered, but no one left. Reverend Calloway stood beneath a branch-laced arbor. A light rain began, and footsteps made soft sounds on wet stone. He raised his voice. Renewal isn't a headline, it's maintenance. Damon and Layla walked up the path side by side. Damon placed a hand in Layla's. We'll keep it that way, he said. The end. What would you have done in Damon's shoes? Loyal to family, yet face to face with the truth? If you've ever carried the weight of a secret, stepped into a role no one trained you for, or chose truth over comfort, drop your story in the comments. Someone out there might be waiting to feel seen. Please comment 1 if you liked the video, comment 0 if you didn't, and feel free to share why so I can keep improving the content for you. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Your support means more than you know.